Friday the 4th of May. Woke at around 9 a.m, took a bath, went to the kitchen where his mother told him that something terrible had happened. A child had disappeared in Praia de Luz, according to Sky News. As soon as he heard this, he and his mother went to look in the garden, which is enclosed with a high wall and fence. They checked to see if the child had managed to enter. They also searched the greenhouse. Then they saw an English passerby. He does not know who the passerby was. The passerby told him that a child had disappeared. Accompanied by that person, he went to the place of the disappearance and was introduced to the parents of Madeleine McCann because he spoke the two languages, Portuguese and English. He started a conversation with the family of the child, offering to help. Together with an officer of the GNR, the local police, and an employee of the resort using several keys, he entered several apartments, opened with the keys supplied by the employees or by the tenants in order to try and locate the child. Some of the apartments were closed and there were no keys for them. These sites were flagged by the GNR man. At this time he met John Hill, the manager of the complex, who supplied them with more keys to the apartments. Now I'm going to come back in a moment to what Marat did after Madeleine was reported missing. But first I need to look at a second series of statements that Marat made to the Portuguese police some 2 months later. He was thoroughly re-questioned on the 10th and 11th of July. By then, the Portuguese police had gathered third-party information about Marat. Notably, they had interrogated his mobile phone records, and they showed that Marat had been lying to them in his initial statements on the 14th of May. Here is his full statement. It is very different from his first one. Altogether, there are around 20 changes of story, some more important than others. Let's just explain some of the more important ones. He failed to mention that on Wednesday the 2nd of May, he met Sergei Malinka at the Batista supermarket near his mother's house at about 10 a.m. That may be significant, as he also failed to remember ringing Sergei Malinka just before midnight on the night Madeleine was reported missing. The evidence is quite clear that Marat and Malinka were long-time associates in some business or other, so it seems odd that Marat would not admit to having had contact with him. Later that morning, he originally said he had not met his lawyer Francisco Pagaret, but in his second statement admitted that he had met him. He says that in the afternoon, on either the 2nd or the 3rd, he visited 2 houses in Lagos with Michaela, each visit lasting about 20 to 30 minutes. Why did he not mention visiting these 2 houses when first interviewed? He does not name the owner, nor does he say why he visited these 2 houses. On the 2nd of May in the evening, he originally said that he and Michaela were at Michaela's home with Michaela's husband Louis, but in his second statement he says her husband wasn't there. On Thursday the 3rd of May, he said he spent the morning after about 10:30 a.m. with Michaela. In his later statement, however, he admitted that he had had a business appointment at a tourist complex called Montinos de Oura in Espiche at 9:30 a.m, where he says he met the father-in-law, a builder, of the lady owner of the complex. This was a major omission. Moreover, Marat doesn't give the lady owner's name, saying he can't remember it, and he again doesn't say what the purpose of this meeting was. On the afternoon that day, Marat originally said he had spent the afternoon with Michaela at her apartment. He now said that he had been with Jorge Silva, his son, and Michaela at the Palmeiras Golf Club. That was another major omission. Why did he not reveal that the first time? And why did they drive several miles from Espiche to the Palmeiras Golf Club on the Thursday afternoon, when they could have carried on talking in the cafe in Lagos or Praia de Luz? Was something very secret being discussed? I visited the golf club in 2014 when I was researching my first Madeleine film. Just pulled up at the Palmeiras Golf Club, which is a few miles east of Lagos, maybe 7 or 8 miles east of Praia de Luz. The movements of Jerry McCann on that Thursday afternoon are shrouded in mystery by a series of inexplicable contradictions. Is it possible that Marat met with him that afternoon at the Palmeiras Golf Club, a place Jerry might well have known, as he had previously been on golfing holidays on the Algarve coast? On that afternoon, in his first statement, Murat said that he and Michaela collected her daughter from school after 3 p.m. and then spent most of the next 4 hours talking to Michaela and her daughter, together with Jorge Silva and his son, up to about 7 p.m. But in his more recent statement, he now says he went straight from school to Michaela's home and did not meet Jorge Silva and his son. Murat's phone records showed that he phoned his friend Sergei Malinka at 11:39 p.m. on the 3rd of May, i.e. the night Madeline was reported missing. They also showed that he phoned Michaela 1 minute earlier. But he did not mention either of these phone calls in his first statement. The day after, on Friday morning, the 4th of May, he originally claimed to have woken up at about 9 a.m. and then had a bath. But when he was shown that he had made a phone call to Michaela at 8:27 a.m. that morning, he now admitted that he must have phoned her then, though he couldn't remember it, and must have woken up earlier. If we go back to the top of Murat's second statement, we find the excuses he makes for having got so many things wrong. He says he was tired, confused, and even rattled by the police interview. It seems likely to me that he deliberately withheld information, which was only forced out of him because his mobile phone had pinged in a number of places he had not previously mentioned. In his statements, he mentions his proposed estate agency business Romijan and developing a website for it. The RO was for Robert and the MI was for Michaela. As it transpired, no such business was ever established. According to his statements, he spent a lot of time discussing this. Murat would have us believe that he discussed the Romijan business on the Wednesday morning and later that morning and again on Wednesday afternoon. The Thursday afternoon and evening was apparently another long meeting in a cafe where Romijan was discussed, and again with Jorge Silva present, except that when re-questioned, Murat later said that no such meeting took place that day. So did it really take 4 separate meetings in different places to discuss a future business? Or were he and the Silvas discussing other matters? Then there are the unexplained meetings. There were either 1 or 2 meetings with his lawyer Francisco Pagaret, but we are not told what they are about. Caught out by the police, Murat admitted attending a meeting in Espiche on the Thursday morning. He doesn't mention the subject matter of the meeting, nor does he give the name of the lady tourist complex owner or the father-in-law builder. Nothing is checkable. Then, caught out by police a second time, he has to admit that on Thursday afternoon he was at the Palmeiras Golf Club, miles away from Michaela's home in Lagos and from his home in Praia de Luz, something he forgot to mention when first questioned. Why did he go there? Who else was there? Furthermore, it was only during Murat's second interview that he casually mentions visiting 2 houses, either on the Wednesday or Thursday, in the company of Michaela and the unnamed house owner. Once again, Murat doesn't tell us what the purpose of those visits were. To sum up then, Murat gave a false account of his movements from the 1st to the 4th of May when first questioned. His second statement is very different. He gives us more detail, but not much. He meets people whose names he doesn't tell us, nor why he met them. If he was evasive or lied the first time police talked to him, could he have done the same in the second interview? On the morning of Friday the 4th of May, Robert Murat became an official interpreter for the Portuguese police. He was bilingual in English and Portuguese. How did he become a key translator? There are 2 separate versions of how this came about. Version 1 is that an Englishman from Stevenage, Stephen Carpenter, as we saw earlier in Murat's first statement, just happened to be strolling past his mother's villa on the Friday morning following Madeline being reported missing. Murat and Carpenter agree that this was between 9 and 10 a.m. Now, we just saw that Murat had to change part of that story because his mobile phone records revealed that he had made a phone call to his fiancée Michaela that morning at 8:27 a.m. In his first statement, talking about the night Madeline was reported missing, it states, 10:30 p.m. or a little later, he heard a siren of an ambulance or police. He commented on that with his mother, however, did not leave the house to investigate. Let us also recall that he forgot when giving his first statement that he had called his friend Sergei Malinka at 11:39 p.m. the night Madeline was reported missing. and made another call a minute earlier to his fiancée Michaela. If Marat is to be believed, he knew nothing that night about a child being missing, despite having heard ambulance and police sirens. At the time he rang Sergei and Michaela, people were running about the village shouting, "Maddie, Maddie." And let's not forget, his mother's house was just yards from the McCann's apartment. Let's also remind ourselves that Marat was very well known and connected in Praia-de-Luz. His mother had lived there for decades. The police found dozens of phone numbers on his mobile. Here is a list of them. He was one of the most known local people. His mother was on the local residence committee. He was a local businessman. Marat's claim to have known nothing about Madeleine's disappearance on that night does not seem remotely credible. So was Marat trying to distance himself from having known anything about Madeleine's disappearance until the Friday morning? Marat says that after learning from Carpenter that Madeleine was about the same age as his own daughter, he eagerly volunteered the information that he was bilingual and offered to act as a translator. Pull the other one. So they went up to the Ocean Club where, Marat says, he was introduced to Jerry and Kate McCann and offered his help as a translator. But is that the real story? To answer this, I'm going to read from an article by a well-briefed independent Portuguese journalist, Paulo Reis. Reis clearly had access to Portuguese police sources who were leaking him information from the Madeleine McCann investigation. In early 2008, he wrote this about Bill Henderson, the British ambassador to Portugal. Staff from Bill Henderson's office suggested the name of Robert Marat as a reliable translator who could be used in the police inquiry in the days following Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Marat was already known among diplomatic staff as he had letters of recommendation from Norfolk Police. He had been working in Norfolk for Bernard Matthews, one of the largest poultry farm companies in the UK, which employs hundreds of Portuguese workers. The fact that Robert Marat has acted before as a translator for Norfolk Police and the recommendation issued by Bill Henderson's office led police to accept the suggestion, according to PJ, Portuguese police sources. After Marat was named a formal suspect, the police went through all translations he had done, checking their accuracy, but no problem was found according to the same sources. Bill Henderson retired from his diplomatic post and went back to the UK in August. Now, bearing in mind the conclusion I made in my last film, that Madeleine may have died as early as Sunday the 29th of April, if that is correct, those who plotted to pass off Madeleine's sudden death as an abduction would have had 4 days to put in hand all the specific plans necessary to make the abduction story as convincing as possible. In order to do that, how convenient would it be to have an insider like Robert Marat in place at just the right time to act as one of the key translators for the police? Was Robert Marat made ready to be in just the right place at the right time to act as a translator when the Portuguese police needed to speak to Jerry and Kate McCann and the rest of their Tapa 7 friends about what had happened to Madeleine? What is very clear from Paulo Reis's report is that the British ambassador and his staff already knew Robert Marat. They had a recommendation apparently from Norfolk Police. That seems curious, as I can find no reference to Robert Marat being an accredited interpreter. Could it be that Robert Marat was a known asset to British intelligence, and his ability to act as an interpreter was one of a number of reasons why someone on Monday the 30th of April may have summoned him to get over to Portugal without delay? If he were to be an interpreter right from the start, he would be in prime position to let key people know what was going on in those all-important first few days of the investigation, sometimes known as the golden period, in which vital clues may be gained or lost. And the Portuguese police records show that Marat was the interpreter for all these English-speaking witnesses. I'm now going to show how Marat strayed well beyond his role as an interpreter by quoting from a report by one of Gonçalo Amaral's key senior staff, Inspector Veranda. He was so concerned about Marat's conduct as an interpreter that on the 11th of May, after Marat had been translating for a week, He filed a complaint about him to Amaral, who was leading the investigation.